Hey everyone, it is All Time here, and as the year 2020 begins to thankfully wrap up, I'd like to look back at my best Mandela Effects of the year. Consider this my best of 2020 video. In this video, I'm going to cover 20 of my favorite Mandela Effects from the dozens and dozens of videos I made this year. If you're new to the channel, this is a great introduction to All Time Scary. The Serbian-American inventor, engineer, and futurist Nikola Tesla was one of the most influential minds of his time. The man behind alternating currents, radio control, wireless charging, a literal death ray, and even the ability to give wireless power to the entire world. These are just a few of the incredible inventions created by the genius Nikola Tesla. But despite all of these incredible accomplishments, I'm not bringing up Nikola Tesla in regards to his discoveries, but instead because he's tied to a fascinating Mandela effect. This effect is a two-part conundrum. The first part being, how did Nikola Tesla die? And the second part being, what age was he when he died? So again, how did Nikola Tesla die? Was it a car accident or a heart attack? And the second question is, what age was Nikola Tesla when he died? Middle age or old age? The answers are now a heart attack and old age. Does that sound right to you? Plenty of people seem to remember an almost alternate version of history where Tesla died because he was hit by a car. Here's what, as of right now, actually happened. Nikola Tesla was struck by a taxicab while walking back to his hotel in 1937 at the age of 81. He somehow survived this, but refused to go to the hospital or even consult a doctor because of an immense fear of doctors and hospitals from an early age. As it goes now, Tesla lived on for 5 more years until his death at the age of 86 in 1943. His cause of death was ruled a coronary thrombosis, which is a blood clot in the heart, so to keep it simple, a heart attack. Although it is still true that the FBI collected all of his belongings 2 days after his death. This Mandela effect has tripped up a lot of people online. So now I'm curious to hear what all of you remember about the life and the death of the legendary Nikola Tesla. Tell me all your thoughts about him in the comments below. Batman is one of the most recognizable characters in the world. His look, backstory, and logo are iconic. So what would happen if one day it changed? Well, that is exactly what happened, and I'm here to get into more details. But first, let me ask you this question. Which of these is the logo Batman wore on his batsuit in the 1989 movie Batman? A or B? This answer is a difficult one, because both are correct at different points in time. The correct answer is now A. As you can see, it has 2 extra points on the bat symbol. That's pretty weird. And weirder still, that altered looking logo isn't reflected anywhere else on any other media. Even the box art and poster for the 1989 Batman movie have just a single point on Batman's symbol. What about the bat signal that's projected into the sky at night in that movie? It's a single point. Even the Batman toys for the 1989 movie have the Batman symbol with only a single point at the bottom. It's as if this one tiny but prominent detail was changed in the film, but every other piece of media around it stayed the same. In fact, the 1960s Batman, a single point. 1992's Batman, a single point. On and on and on. All of them are the iconic bat symbol with just a single point, except the 1989 Batman batsuit. Even the 1989 Batwing, Batman's custom combat aircraft, has a single point as the tip at the end of his ship. So what do you all think about this? Such a weird change to such an iconic symbol that has been around for decades and decades. It makes no sense to me, but I'm super curious to hear what you all remember. Frosty the Snowman is a childhood classic to many in the United States. He was a snowman brought to life through magic in a 1950 recording, but became a household name in his 1969 animated film debut. Frosty the Snowman is a memorable character, and if you ask most people, they can describe every detail about him. But miraculously, Frosty is now missing something. So here's what I'd like you to do. Visualize all of the accessories and clothing articles on Frosty the Snowman. Now what do you see? Let's see what we've got. We have a button nose, we have 2 eyes made out of coal, and here is the Mandela Effect. Which of these items did he never adorn in the 1969 film? An old silk hat? A corncob pipe? a red scarf, a broom. Frosty the Snowman has an old silk hat, a broom, and a corncob pipe, but has surprisingly never worn a red scarf. Do you remember a red scarf? For some reason, dozens of people online seem to remember Frosty the Snowman wearing a scarf, and most remember it being red. So where did it go? Why do so many people remember this detail that now seemingly doesn't exist? It's really interesting. Even some modern-day Frosty the Snowman publications and media today show him wearing a red scarf. If you compare the past and the present, at some point some artist said, "Oh yeah, of course he has a red scarf," and drew Frosty with a red scarf. Does this prove he used to have a scarf, and that the past has been altered in some slight way? Or is this just a massive case of misremembering an iconic childhood character? I'll leave that for all of you to argue over in the comments below. Oh, and before I leave this topic, check out this funny little detail. Look at what the kids are wearing in Frosty the Snowman. You see anything wrong with this image? Did the creative behind these illustrations grow up in a place without snow? Do they not realize it's cold? These kids are wearing shorts in a blizzard. Anyway. This next Mandela effect has to do with horses. With horses being mammals, this means among other things that they have hair all over. Long tails, a thick mane, and fur all over their body. But here's my Mandela effect question for you. Can horses grow mustaches? Yes or no? As unbelievable as it may seem, horses can now grow mustaches. I'm sure all of you knew that, right? Just look at these photos. Amazing. Apparently some breeds are more prone to growing mustaches than others, but it can naturally occur across the board. Does that sound right to you? And have any of you out there seen a horse with a mustache before? It's Mandela effects like this that make me wish I grew up closer to the country, because I can't for the life of me remember ever seeing a horse with a mustache. I'm trying to visualize it, I just can't. So let me hear what you remember and what you know in the comments below. Next up, we have a spelling Mandela effect. This particular brand of whipped cream is no stranger to the Mandela effect, because people already remember its name's spelling changing previously. Well, it seems Reddi Whip is at it again, so here's my question. How do you spell Reddi Whip? Here's 4 options. Let me know which one you think is the correct spelling of Reddi Whip. Let's see how you fared. The correct spelling of Reddi Whip is Redddiwip. I'm not joking. Google it right now and you'll see it. Is this how you remember it? Or has the Mandela effect struck again? For this next Mandela effect, we're going to keep things simple and straightforward. George Washington Carver is a man every American who attended public school has learned about. He's most known for the over 300 incredible uses of peanuts he discovered. Now, with all that in mind, was it George Washington Carver that discovered peanut butter? Yes or no? Like every memory of yours that I unintentionally destroy, this is yet another one to throw away. As it turns out, George Washington Carver did not discover peanut butter. And no, this isn't a simple, he did, but it was actually discovered long before him and kind of forgotten situation. It turns out that 3 people discovered it before him, including the ancient Inca and Aztec civilizations. Does that sound right to you? If you're like me, you grew up learning that George Washington Carver found over 300 uses for peanuts, including his most famous discovery, peanut butter. Unfortunately though, history doesn't seem to agree with this anymore. Am I the only one here with these now inaccurate memories? I hope not. Please, let me hear all of your thoughts in the comments below. Alcohol is consumed all over the world, and with so many manufacturers, it can be hard to really stand out and get your product noticed. The newly created vodka, cognac, and fruit-flavored brand Hpnotiq was created in 2001, and it found it by creating a liquor that literally sparkled. Shaking up a bottle of Hpnotiq created a glitter-like sparkle effect that became an instant hit. In fact, that's the only reason I personally know of Hpnotiq. A friend saw it on a shelf and bought it, and no doubt, the sparkle makes it very memorable. And honestly, you can't say that about most liquors. So here is where the Mandela Effect comes in. If you have ever had this drink before, or purchased a bottle of it, or simply seen it on a store shelf, the sparkle, the design, the name, it's all very memorable. So here's the question, how is Hpnotiq spelled? Is it spelled Hpnotiq, Hpnotiq, or Hpnotiq? If you're like me, you remember it being Hpnotiq, with a Y and a Q. And that's understandable. It's a slight spelling variation of the word hypnotic so that they could trademark the name. But you'd be wrong. It's actually Hpnotiq, with that really strange spelling. That spelling is absurd. Not just in the sense that it's purposefully confusing, but it's a pain on the eyes. I've seen this drink hundreds of times. I've even held the bottle in my hands on multiple occasions. This is absolutely something I would have noticed. But here we are. Has Hpnotiq always been spelled like this, or is this another example of the Mandela Effect? Let me know. Theodore Roosevelt was the 26th President of the United States and a historical oddity. Coming from wealth, he strangely enough battled corporate monopolies and founded the Progressive Party. Teddy, as he liked to be called, was an eccentric extrovert constantly needing to be the center of attention. The first soldier to fire a shot, the father of the modern-day Navy as well as the nature conservation movement, Teddy was even a Harvard grad school dropout. As President of the United States, Teddy Roosevelt traveled all over the country, meeting and talking to people. One time he was giving a speech and he actually got shot. Instead of ending the speech and getting necessary medical help, he kept going for 45 minutes. The man did it all. He was even blinded in one eye during a boxing match in the White House. Do you think he quit fighting after that? Nope, he switched to jiu-jitsu. All this to say is that Teddy Roosevelt was the type of person to make this Mandela Effect sound not rational, but believable. So here is the Mandela Effect. Do you remember learning about or hearing about how Teddy Roosevelt boxed a kangaroo? Yes or no? Well, if you did, you weren't alone. Turns out that Teddy Roosevelt never actually boxed a kangaroo. In fact, this weird memory that so many people seem to have, as of now, has no basis in history. It simply doesn't exist. Teddy Roosevelt was known for roughhousing and fighting, as well as leading hunting expeditions all over the world. The idea of him boxing with a kangaroo, it sounds absurd, but if anyone did it, it would have been him. Have you heard of this strange idea before? And if you have, where did it come from? The only residue I was able to find regarding this Mandela Effect is a Futurama clip of Teddy Roosevelt's preserved head watching Bender the robot box a kangaroo. Teddy then makes a joke referencing all of this by saying, "Man boxing a kangaroo is a peculiar sight, but a kangaroo boxing a robot? Now I'm afraid you've lost me." This silly clip makes reference to this strange and remembered idea of Roosevelt at some point boxing a kangaroo, but, as I said before, it seemingly didn't happen. So let me know what you think in the comments below, because this one is a strange one and I'd like to get to the bottom of it. The Hunger Games was a movie released in 2012 and was based off the 2008 book of the same name. The aspect of the film we're talking about today is the Battle Royale competition. A bunch of people usually spread out over a large map fighting to the death until there's only one person remaining. Well, our Hunger Games Mandela Effect has to do with the one scene right before the Hunger Games start. Do you remember when all the participants are standing on their own individual platforms, waiting for the games to start? Do you remember the scene when someone stepped off of the platform early and blew up? Well, if you do remember that, apparently that scene never happened and doesn't exist. Now, I saw the Hunger Games back in the day, and this sounds familiar, but I'm more concerned with what you remember. Some have speculated online that this scene was in a parody movie called The Starving Games. But I've never seen or heard of that movie before, so that doesn't really explain why I have a memory of someone exploding in the Hunger Games movie. Another explanation is that the explosion may have been in the book, but not in the movie. Well, I don't have a copy of the book and I've never read it before, so that doesn't really explain it either. So what do you think? Is this just a weird, seemingly implanted memory, or do you remember this scene as well? Tell me all of your thoughts in the comments below. Back in 2004, the classic first-person shooter video game Halo 2 was released on the original Xbox. In Halo 2, the story was split up between two main characters, the Master Chief and the Arbiter. This Mandela Effect has to do with the Arbiter and his armor design from Halo 2. This game being the introduction to the Arbiter, his design and look was iconic. It was permanently burned into the memories of everyone who played this game. But now, it seems like new details have appeared on his character model that, according to hundreds of people online, didn't exist before. So what do you think? Do you remember the Arbiter having this extremely detailed design in his pauldron? You see, the armor on the Arbiter is unique and memorable because of its strange design. One shoulder is raised much higher than the other. The raised side is always visible in cinematics as well as cooperative play. Somebody at some point would have surely noticed this delicate engraving before, right? These games are beloved, they're played over and over and over again, they're analyzed, there's dozens and dozens of YouTube channels dedicated to researching, studying, and playing these games, and no one's ever noticed this before? That's when this thought came to me. Halo 2 Anniversary is the remaster of the original Halo 2, and it came out nearly 10 years after the fact. I initially thought that this change to the Arbiter's armor could have been a visual upgrade or a redesign for the remastered version, but when comparing the two games, I discovered that actually the symbol is in both games. So what do you all think? I find it incredible that this very beautiful detail has never been noticed before in one of the most beloved and replayed games ever. People have played Halo games for nearly 20 years, but this was just discovered. Is this a Mandela effect, or has this detail always been there? Let me hear your thoughts in the comments below. Our next Mandela effect has to do with a series of classic paintings by Cassius Marcellus Coolidge between 1894 and 1910. These paintings are known as dogs playing poker. I'm sure even the most casual art fan will recognize these paintings because they have been displayed in the backgrounds of numerous movies, shows, and quite a few bars. Here is the dogs playing poker Mandela effect. Did any of the dogs ever wear a transparent green visor? You know, this kind of hat. Yes or no? Despite the fact that a ton of people fondly remember these paintings of realistic dogs playing poker, no such painting exists with a dog wearing a transparent green visor. What amazes me most is that I can see the painting in my mind. I'm sure quite a lot of you can as well. So where did we get this visual from? I tried digging deeper into this case and I haven't found anything yet. We all know these paintings were very popular and I'm sure quite a few spin-offs and variations exist, but even then I'm still unable to locate a painting with a green poker visor. So if anyone has any idea where this comes from, please leave it in the comments below. Together, we can hopefully solve this mystery. Here's a strange Mandela effect. You know how companies misspell words on purpose so that they can copyright the spelling? Lazy Boy is a good example of this. A couple more examples are Fruit Loops, Flickr, Play-Doh. I bring up this common corporate practice because our bonus Mandela effect is about a company's name and how they spell it. So, how do you spell the job-hunting social media platform, LinkedIn? I'm sure plenty of you have made a LinkedIn page before when looking for a job, before you decided to ignore it indefinitely because it was pointless and it never resulted in a job. Is it spelled LINKDIN? Or is it spelled LINKEDIN? Even ignoring the weird fact that LinkedIn is now one word instead of two, people seemingly remember LinkedIn having a really weird spelling, with the E missing entirely. Well, that isn't the case anymore, and it never has been. So what do you think? Do any of these Mandela effects affect you? If so, let me hear it in the comments below. Let's talk about Around the World in 80 Days. This famous novel, released in 1872 by Jules Verne, captured the minds of readers the world over. At that time, the idea of traveling across the entire world for most was a near impossibility. But given our modern technology, today, the prospect of circumnavigating the globe is no more difficult than surviving 40 hours in a plane. Times have greatly changed. The feat was first accomplished in 1522 by Portuguese explorer Ferdinand Magellan. But the sad reality of his journey was that of the 260 original crewmen, only 18 survived the journey, and it took them 3 years. All of this backstory to reiterate how exciting and thrilling Around the World in 80 Days was. This novel is still read by American students to this day. Due to this Mandela Effect should hit a lot of people. So quickly imagine what the characters traveled in this novel. Have you come up with an answer yet? Here is my question. Did the characters of Around the World in 80 Days ever fly in a hot air balloon? Yes or no? In this novel, the main character and his companions used a transcontinental train, a ferry, a steamboat, and even an elephant, but surprisingly enough, they never once used a hot air balloon. Is that what you recall? If you remember a hot air balloon, you aren't alone. This Mandela Effect is really confusing because there exist variations of cover art for this book with hot air balloons on them. And it's not just one book, there are dozens of examples of this. Now, this doesn't make any sense considering they never used a hot air balloon. Strangely enough, the hypothetical idea of using a hot air balloon is brought up in the novel, but it's quickly shot down. So what gives? Why in the 1956 film adaptation did they use a hot air balloon? Is it all simply creative liberties, or was the hot air balloon at one point in time used as transportation in Around the World in 80 Days? As always, let me know what you remember and what you believe in the comments below. Bridge to Terabithia is a 2007 coming-of-age adventure fantasy movie based on the 1977 novel of the same name. This Mandela Effect has to do with the death of the character Leslie and how Jess, the other main character, finds out about her death. So my question today is simple. In the movie Bridge to Terabithia, did they show Leslie's accidental death? Yes or no? The answer is no. They don't actually show the rope breaking and Leslie falling and hitting her head. Her death is simply explained by Jess's parents when he gets home. I don't have a strong memory either way on this Mandela Effect, but a lot of people online did. It seems like every other comment is back and forth with the scene. Some argue without a doubt that it shows the rope break and that Leslie fell and hit her head, while others argue that it was never shown, only mentioned. One comment I read claimed to remember their kids crying when Leslie fell and how she had to explain over and over again, it's just a movie, it isn't real. So what gives? Some speculate that the movie may have been altered, that this death scene was originally in the movie but was later cut out because it was primarily for kids and young teens. So the question now is it possible that Bridge to Terabithia was altered post-release? Well, I looked into this and it's absolutely possible, but without studio confirmation on an edit, we can only speculate. Digging deeper into this mystery, I discovered the original runtime is listed on Movie Showtime websites as 1 hour and 36 minutes. The digital copy that you can rent or purchase today has the exact same runtime. So an edit post-release is extremely unlikely unless they replace the missing footage with the exact same amount of extra footage, which seems really complicated and unnecessary. To believe that, we would need evidence of a new scene, and no one has mentioned that or talked about an extra scene in this movie. So as far as I can tell, this movie was not altered or cut. So wherever you fall in this Mandela Effect, I'd love to hear your take in the comments. Do you actually remember seeing Leslie's death in Bridge to Terabithia? Or was it simply talked about but never actually shown? I'm so curious to hear all of your thoughts below. The Mandela Effect not only alters the past, but can sometimes even create events that none of us remember living through or learning about. Just as the Mandela Effect can delete something like the Shazam movie that so many of us remember, it can also create. Building off this premise, does anyone remember how intensely awake and on edge America was after 9/11 back in 2001? It was one of the most terrifying tragedies that America had ever faced, and in its wake the world watched and waited for what was to come next. Apparently, we didn't have to wait long, because 2 months later, on November 12, 2001, an airplane crashed in Queens, New York, taking the lives of 265 people. I'm bringing up this tragedy because a large number of people seemingly don't remember this happening at all. Do you remember this? Apparently, American Airlines Flight 587, a commercial airliner, came down because of a mechanical failure and crashed in New York 2 months after 9/11. I don't remember anything about this, and I'm not the only one. I'm always a little hesitant to bring up tragic events like this until enough time has passed so that we can look at them objectively and not through an emotional lens. This crash is obviously a disaster and a tragedy, but the Mandela Effect simply poses the idea that some people may not have actually lived through this. That this event was real to some people on one timeline, but to others on another timeline, this potentially never happened. Anyway, I wanted to hear all of your thoughts about this. Is this an actual example of a Mandela Effect changing history? Or is this simply a massive case of misremembering? Besides the strangely large amount of people online arguing this event's historical actuality, another interesting residue argument comes from an Atlantic article. This article titled, strangely enough, Remembering America's Second Deadliest Plane Crash. The author goes on to say, the second deadliest plane crash in American history took place just 2 months after 9/11, when American Airlines Flight 587 to Santo Domingo plummeted almost immediately after taking off from JFK. Continuing on in the article, the two authors mention something really interesting to me. I hope you find this quote just as fascinating. 10 years later, despite the magnitude of this disaster, it has been largely forgotten, overshadowed by the immensity of 9/11. This line is so strange to me. If this was the second worst airline crash in American history, why do so many people not remember this, or even recall simple details regarding it? Because remember, if you lived through 9/11, and you're old enough to understand what was happening, this event was burned into our consciousness. Most of us can remember where we were, who was there, and what was happening. It was a deeply traumatic event. As for this plane crash 2 months later, I have no recollection whatsoever. Yes, my memory is but one anecdotal experience, but the world after 9/11 was vastly different than it is today. We were all glued to our TVs every single day. There were no smartphones, no social media, no apps, no online games, nothing like that. All we knew was that bad people hurt us and that they might hurt us again. Shortly after 9/11, we even had a massive anthrax scare. This event should have registered, it should have stuck, but it seemingly didn't. One last interesting detail is that one article I found talked about this plane crashing into the water. How is a detail like that even arguable? Was this a massive mistake that somehow no one noticed and changed in the last 19 years? Or has this story changed multiple times thanks to the Mandela Effect? I'll let you be the judge. Next up is a Mandela Effect that relates to the very popular video game Halo 2. Now, this Mandela Effect is more of an explanation, and not so much of a question, so I'm going to try and break it down as simply as I can. In every mainline Halo game from Halo 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, you could play split screen in co-op, meaning that it splits the TV screen into two halves and you and your friend can play at the same time. Now, this co-op feature has existed on every single level in Halo 1 through 4, but now it doesn't. Somehow the first two levels of Halo 2 are no longer playable in co-op, and they never have been. No matter what you do, you can't even force it to work in these games on the original Xbox game or the remastered version on Xbox One and PC. It doesn't exist anymore, it has simply vanished. Creepier still, you can't find footage of this existing. Now, the easiest explanation is that it has always been this way and that Halo fans are being silly. Well, here's the argument against that. Halo is a game that is built around replayability, meaning you can play it over and over and over and discover new things and have new experiences. Single player, co-op, multiplayer, the trifecta of Halo. If somehow the first two levels of Halo 2 weren't playable in co-op, this detail would have been known and discussed years ago. I mean, this game originally came out in 2004, yet somehow this has never come up before on the internet until this year. That's incredible, almost inconceivable. The first level is called the Hpnotiq, and it's simply a cutscene, or an animated movie. But since this would be in co-op, it would just be playing for both players. As of now, you can't play that with another person. Even sitting in front of the same TV, if you say let's play co-op and press start, they just skip the opening cutscene. It simply doesn't play. The second level is called the Armory, and this one is especially confusing because plenty of people have memories of playing this level with a friend, myself included. This is one of the craziest Mandela Effects I've ever encountered because I have memories playing this level with my cousin when I was younger. I can see it clear as day. Both of us were trapped in that tiny monorail as it moved from one part of the level to another, while we jumped around waiting to start shooting. This one is unexplainable. I just don't get it. There's even a comment I found, with over 1,100 thumbs up. Somehow everyone is misremembering, and this is all a fabrication or something has changed. And 1,100, that's a lot of people. Did you ever play these levels in co-op, or have you never been able to? I'm excited to hear what you have to say. Let's talk about Lamb Chop, the strange but lovable sock puppet sheep. Lamb Chop was voiced by the late and great Sherry Lewis. Now, this puppet had a preschool TV show that ran from 1992 to 1995 called Lamb Chop's Play Along. The reason I bring up Lamb Chop is because of an iconic song that anyone familiar with Lamb Chop would know. The song is called The Song That Blank Ends. That is today's Mandela Effect. What is the name of that song? Is it The Song That Doesn't End? Or is it The Song That Never Ends? The correct answer is, shockingly enough, The Song That Doesn't End. Is that the title that you remember? Because that doesn't sound right to me. Strangely enough, if you look up this song on Google, most of the videos for this song are titled The Song That Never Ends. One of the few videos that I could find that actually had comments turned on was on Facebook. And that comment section was filled with confused people asking if anyone else remembers the song being Never Ends, not Doesn't End. Even the title of the Facebook video was The Song That Never Ends. I listened to the entire song, and it never says never. That's pretty weird if you ask me. So what do you remember? Is it the song that never ends, or have you always remembered it as the song that doesn't end? We're talking about a strange detail regarding one of America's greatest tragedies, September 11th, 2001. So what is that detail? Well, that's the Mandela Effect. Do any of you remember a hotel being directly located in between the World Trade Center towers? And I'm not talking about a nearby hotel or a hotel down the street. I'm talking directly in front of them, visible in a ton of photographs from that day. So to rephrase this more clearly, was there a hotel located between the Twin Towers? Yes or no? The answer is yes. Strangely enough, if you look up photos of the World Trade Center, you'll now see a Marriott hotel residing there, named the Marriott World Trade Center, aka WTC-3. It was located between the North and the South Towers and now is distinctly visible in a ton of the 9/11 photographs. Supposedly this hotel was built in 1981 before its destruction in 2001, but it's only recently gained in Mandela Effect popularity as the discussion around it builds. What I really find interesting now are the pictures of the towers. The image is iconic, it's burnt into the minds of anyone born before the tragedy. But now there is what seems to be an extra building residing between them. It just looks out of place. What do you think? Is it possible that the thousands of people online discussing this simply never noticed the building before? Or is this actually a Mandela Effect to you? Regarding this mysterious hotel that a lot of people said didn't exist before, but others said did, it's fascinating nonetheless. I will leave it up to the diehard believers and non-believers to argue about in the comments below. This one is all in your hands. Let's go back in time to when breakdancing first started. Most people believe that breakdancing started in the late 1970s and early 1980s in New York City. I'm pretty sure that's what you remember as well, right? Early hip-hop culture and that style of dancing were intertwined together. But now it seems that breakdancing's origins have been rewritten. In fact, we now have evidence of breakdancing all the way back in the 1930s. Yes, the 1930s, 40 years before its reported origin. I'm not joking, I'm not pulling your leg. Here is a video clip of people breakdancing all the way back in the 1930s. Prepare to have your minds thoroughly confused. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but then again, a lot of this doesn't make sense to begin with. So I'm going to post a link to the full video in the description box below. Be sure to check it out. It's a very strange video. All-time games, which is obviously about games, and all-time movies, which is all about movies. Obviously. So yeah, some could argue maybe that's a little too much all-time, but I'm trapped here and they won't let me leave, so please subscribe. I hear if I can get enough views, I can see my family. We're going to talk about that awful and tragic day of September 2001. What started as a bright and sunny morning turned to tragedy in an instant and continued to get worse as the day went on. But strangely enough, we aren't talking about the obvious details regarding that horrible day. We're actually talking about a concurrent event that will hopefully confuse and bewilder some of you. Did you know on September 11th, 2001, New York City was supposed to get hit by a massive hurricane named Hurricane Erin? Here's one of the reported images of this hurricane from back then, and as you can see, it's massive. Does any of this sound familiar? Do any of you remember hearing about a hurricane about to hit New York City on the same day that the towers went down? It had been heading on an impossibly straight line for New York City for 4 to 5 days. The closest it got to landfall was the coast of New York. Supposedly, Hurricane Erin's size was comparable to Hurricane Katrina, and its power was comparable to Hurricane Sandy.
Country kids, on this Tuesday, the night of the Latin Grammys. Sunny skies down through Texas, all the way from the bottom of Texas to the top of North Dakota. Little rain to the right of North Dakota. Parts of North Dakota may see a little rain. To the west of the country, no problem. To the east of the country, no problems except down in Florida, a little rain. Other than that, it's kind of quiet around the country. We like quiet. It's quiet. It's too quiet. That's a quick look at the national forecast. Here's an early look at your weather.
Hurricane Erin got so close to hitting that thunder and rain were reported at JFK Airport, Newark Airport, as well as LaGuardia Airport. So why don't any of us remember this massive hurricane hitting New York City? Why did all of the 9/11 photos and videos show bright and sunny skies? Well, apparently right before landfall on the morning of September 11th, 2001, Hurricane Erin did a near unprecedented turn of 150 degrees and just flew off into the ocean. It's as if Hurricane Erin realized that enough tragedy was going to happen that day, it just decided to leave. Do you ever remember hearing about Hurricane Erin, or have you ever heard anyone discuss it ever since? I came across this while doing some research for my last video, and I can't help but be amazed. A hurricane with such insane power and size was about to strike on the same day as America's biggest tragedy, but instead turns around and disappears, only to never be talked about or mentioned again. This one, I don't even know what to say. As always, let me hear all of your thoughts about this one, as well as all the other Mandela Effects I talked about today, in the comments below. So there you have it, 20 amazing Mandela Effects, my best of 2020. I loved making this video and I hope you enjoyed watching it. Until next time.